My wife said, "We're in an open relationship, the same way you announce a gas leak, quietly and with the hope you don't notice the smell. I'm Nick Garvey, 37 years old, structural engineer who builds bridges for a living. Ironic, considering my marriage just collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane." Laura sat across from me at our kitchen table, her manicured fingers wrapped around a coffee mug that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. "It's not about you, Nick," she continued, her voice carrying that practiced tone she used with difficult clients at her public relations firm. "People evolve. Relationships evolve. We can't stay trapped in outdated concepts of monogamy." I took a sip of my coffee and studied her face. Laura was beautiful in that polished magazine cover way that turned heads at restaurants. Blonde hair, always perfectly styled, makeup applied with surgical precision, clothes that whispered expensive rather than shouted it. She'd been the catch everyone said I was lucky to land. "Outdated concepts?" I repeated slowly. "Like wedding vows?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. This is about growth, about exploring our authentic selves. Your authentic self wants to sleep with other people." "Our authentic selves," she corrected. "This works both ways, Nick. You're free to explore, too." I set down my mug and leaned back in my chair. Through the window of our Baltimore rowhouse, I could see Mrs. Feldman across the street watering her flowers. Normal people doing normal things while my world shifted on its axis. "How long?" I asked. "How long what?" "How long have you been exploring your authentic self?" A flush crept up her neck, barely visible under her foundation. "That's not the point." "Actually, Laura, that's exactly the point." I stood up, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in months. The pieces were falling into place now. Her late nights at the office, the new lingerie I wasn't supposed to notice, the way she'd started pronouncing certain words differently, like she was auditioning for a different social class. "Where are you going?" she asked as I headed toward the stairs. "To pack a bag. Seems like you've got some exploring to do, and I'd hate to cramp your style." "Nick, wait. We need to talk about this like adults." I paused on the bottom step. "We just did. You want an open marriage? I want a closed one. Looks like we're incompatible." 20 minutes later, I had a duffel bag packed and my phone discreetly recording in the kitchen. Call it engineer's intuition, but I had a feeling Laura's exploration was about to get very interesting, and I wanted documentation. As I loaded my bag into my truck, my phone buzzed with a text from Tasha, Laura's best friend and fellow social climber. "So, heard the news, dinner tonight, I'm buying." I looked back at the house where Laura was probably already dialing her mystery man, then typed back, "Sure, Mario's at 7? Perfect. Can't wait to catch up." I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, catching a glimpse of Laura watching from the living room window. She thought she was playing four-dimensional chess. I was about to flip the board. The sublet apartment I found that afternoon was a far cry from our renovated row house. Third-floor walk-up in Federal Hill, furnished with the kind of furniture that looked like it came from a going-out-of-business sale. But it had what I needed: privacy, internet, and a view of the harbor that reminded me why I loved this city. Pete Martinez, my best friend since college and the only guy I knew who could make a living wage installing HVAC systems, helped me move my essentials. "So she just dropped it on you like that?" Pete asked, hefting a box of books up the narrow stairs, like she was announcing a change in cable providers. "And you're taking it this well because—" I paused on the landing, considering how much to tell him. Pete was loyal to a fault, but he was also the kind of guy who wore his emotions on his sleeve. "Because I'm not taking it well. I'm taking it smart." That evening, Mario's Italian restaurant buzzed with the usual crowd of young professionals and couples on date nights. Tasha arrived fashionably late, sliding into the booth across from me with the predatory grace of a woman who'd never paid for her own drinks. "You look good," she said, signaling the waiter for wine. "Relaxed." Nothing like having your life imploded to clear the schedule." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Laura said you were being dramatic about this." "Laura's been talking about it." "Honey, Laura's been talking about nothing else. The whole girls' night crew knows about your situation." I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but kept my expression neutral. "The whole crew?" "Well, you know how it is. These things get around." Tasha leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Between you and me, I think she's handling this all wrong. You're a catch, Nick. Any woman would be lucky to have you." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The waiter brought wine, and Tasha made a show of tasting it like she was at a vineyard in Napa instead of a neighborhood Italian joint. I watched her performance and realized Laura hadn't just been talking about our marriage. She'd been rewriting the narrative. What exactly has Laura been saying? Tasha's eyes glittered with the anticipation of someone about to share premium gossip. That you've been distant lately, jealous, that she suggested opening things up to save the marriage, but you stormed out like a child. I nodded slowly, taking a sip of wine that suddenly tasted like vinegar. Interesting interpretation. I told her she should have eased you into it. Men need time to process these things. Tasha reached across the table and touched my hand. But maybe this is for the best. Maybe you needed someone to push you out of your comfort zone. Her fingers lingered on mine, and I understood the real reason for this dinner invitation. Laura hadn't just opened our marriage, she'd opened hunting season, and I was apparently the prize buck. You might be right, I said, letting my thumb brush against her knuckles. Maybe it's time I started exploring too. Tasha's smile could have powered the restaurant's lights. 2 hours later, we were walking along the harbor, Tasha's arm linked through mine while she took selfies for her social media accounts. I made sure to smile for the camera, knowing exactly who would be checking her feeds tonight. Post that one, I suggested, pointing to a particularly cozy-looking shot. You look amazing. She giggled and typed rapidly on her phone. Done. God, I love this filter. My own phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Laura. Really, Nick? Tasha? I showed the message to Tasha, who laughed and grabbed my phone. Let me, she said, typing back. He's exploring his authentic self. Isn't that what you wanted? The response came back within seconds. We need to talk? Tomorrow, Tasha typed. He's busy tonight? I took my phone back and turned it off. Thanks for dinner, and the advice. Anytime, she purred, standing on her toes to kiss my cheek. Call me tomorrow? Count on it. But as I walked back to my apartment, I wasn't thinking about Tasha or her obvious intentions. I was thinking about the way Laura had phrased her text. Not hurt, not angry, but territorial, like I'd taken something that belonged to her. The next morning brought a rude awakening. My boss, Jim Crawford, called me into his office before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Nick, we need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to my attention. Jim was a good guy, the kind of boss who remembered your kids' names and never made you work weekends unless the project was genuinely critical. Seeing him uncomfortable made my stomach clench. What kind of concerns? About your personal situation. Look, normally I wouldn't get involved, but when it starts affecting the workplace... How is it affecting the workplace? Jim shifted in his chair. Someone called yesterday, said you've been unstable lately. Erratic behavior, possible substance issues, that kind of thing. I felt the room temperature drop about 10 degrees. Someone called. A woman. Said she was concerned about your mental state, thought we should know in case there were safety issues on the job sites. Did this woman give a name? She said she was a close friend. Look, Nick, I've known you for 8 years. You're solid, reliable, never given me a moment's trouble, but I had to document this call, and if there are more complaints... There won't be, I said, standing up, because I'm going to handle this situation. Jim looked relieved. Good. Take whatever time you need to get things sorted out. I walked back to my desk with my hands clenched into fists. Around me, my coworkers were starting their day, discussing weekend plans and project deadlines. Normal people with normal problems. My phone buzzed. A text from Laura. We really do need to talk. This doesn't have to get ugly. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, You're right. It doesn't have to get ugly. But it's going to. The thing about being married to someone in public relations is that you learn how information flows. Laura had spent 7 years teaching me about narrative control, message management, and the art of making people believe what you want them to believe. She was about to get a masterclass in her own subject. I spent the morning at a coffee shop near Laura's office building, watching the lunch crowd flow in and out. At 12:30, right on schedule, she emerged with her usual group, 3 other PR executives who looked like they'd been assembled by a casting director for Successful Urban Women. I followed at a distance as they walked to their regular spot, a trendy bistro that served $15 salads to people who thought expensive meant healthy. Laura held court at their usual table, gesturing animatedly while her friends leaned in with expressions of fascinated concern. My phone, discreetly recording from my jacket pocket, picked up fragments of conversation as I passed their table. Totally unstable reaction. Tasha said he was practically stalking her. Always knew he had jealousy issues. I ordered a sandwich at the counter and found a seat within earshot, pulling out my laptop like I was working on a project. Laura's voice carried clearly over the ambient noise. The thing is, I suggested counseling first, she was saying. But Nick has this whole macho thing about therapy. He'd rather just storm off and play victim. Men, one of her friends said with practiced sympathy. They can't handle it when women take control of their own lives. Exactly. And now he's trying to embarrass me by parading around with my friends. It's so transparent. I nearly choked on my sandwich. Laura was rewriting history in real time, turning her affair announcement into a reasonable suggestion for couples counseling, and my calm departure into an unstable tantrum. But the most interesting part came when her phone buzzed and she glanced at it with a secretive smile. "Speak of the devil," she murmured, typing rapidly. "Ethan?" asked one of the friends. "He wants to meet tonight. Says he has news about the Morrison account." The friends exchanged knowing looks. Ethan Drake, Laura's boss, and apparently her exploration partner. Married, 40-something, the kind of guy who wore boat shoes to the office and talked about his weekend sailing adventures. I finished my lunch and walked back to the office, my mind spinning with possibilities. Laura thought she was controlling the narrative, but she'd just given me the key to flipping the script. That evening, I drove to the marina where Ethan kept his yacht. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to boat owners checking on their vessels. Ethan's silver BMW sat in its usual spot, vanity plate reading Drake 1. I didn't touch the car. Didn't need to. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Pete. "I need a favor," I said when he answered. "Shoot." "Remember that time in college when you rewired Professor Mitchell's car stereo to play polka music every time he started the engine?" Pete laughed. "You want me to mess with someone's car?" "Nothing permanent. Nothing that would cause an accident. Just memorable." "Text me the details. This is about Laura. This is about evening the score." 20 minutes later, Pete arrived with his work van and a toolbox. We worked quickly and quietly, Pete's expertise with electrical systems proving invaluable. By the time we finished, Ethan's BMW had been transformed into a very expensive practical joke. "You sure about this?" Pete asked as we packed up. "She wants to play games," I said. "Let's play games." The next morning, I was having coffee at a diner near Laura's office when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Is this Nick Garvey?" The voice was female, nervous. "Who's asking?" This is Janet Drake, Ethan's wife." I nearly dropped my phone. "Mrs. Drake, what can I do for you?" "I was wondering if we could meet, for coffee or something. I have some questions about my husband's work situation." An hour later, I sat across from Janet Drake in a quiet cafe in Fells Point. She was attractive in an understated way, the kind of woman who'd probably been stunning in college but had settled into comfortable middle age. Her hands shook slightly as she stirred her latte. "I found some text messages," she said without preamble, "between Ethan and someone at his office. They're not about work." I kept my expression neutral. "That must be difficult." "The woman he's texting, her name is Laura. I looked her up on the company website. She's married to someone named Nick Garvey." Janet's eyes met mine. "That's you, isn't it?" "Yes. So we're both getting screwed over." "Yeah." Janet laughed, a sound somewhere between humor and hysteria. "God, what a mess. How long have you known?" "Officially, 3 days. Unofficially, I've been suspicious for months. 3 months for me. Maybe longer." She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. This was from last week. The text was from Ethan to Laura. "Can't wait to see you tonight? N still clueless?" "N," I said. How thoughtful of him to abbreviate my name. They think we're idiots. Maybe we have been. But that doesn't mean we have to stay that way. Janet studied my face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking 2 people can play the information game better than 1. We talked for another hour, sharing details and timelines. Janet had been documenting Ethan's behavior for weeks, collecting evidence for what she assumed would be an inevitable divorce. I had my recordings and observations of Laura's recent activities. "There's something else," Janet said as we prepared to leave. "Ethan's been moving money around, taking cash advances, making transfers to accounts I don't recognize." "How much money?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands." That was interesting. Ethan made good money as a senior partner at the PR firm, but he also had expensive tastes. Yacht payments, country club memberships, the kind of lifestyle that looked impressive but ate up income fast. "Would you be willing to share some of that financial information?" I asked. "Why?" "Because I have a feeling Laura doesn't know about the money problems, and nothing ruins a gold digger's day like finding out her sugar daddy is broke." Janet smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. "I like the way you think." That afternoon, I put phase 2 of my plan into motion. Using the information Janet had provided, I created a simple spreadsheet showing Ethan's recent financial activity. Cash advances, loan applications, credit card debt. The picture it painted was of a man living well beyond his means. Then I did something Laura had taught me years ago. I let the information find its way to the right people through seemingly innocent channels. Tasha was having drinks with her usual crowd at a trendy bar in Federal Hill. I knew this because she'd posted about it on every social media platform she used. I also knew that one of her drinking buddies, a woman named Melissa, worked in accounting at a firm that did business with Ethan's company. I crafted a careful message and sent it to Melissa from an anonymous email account. Thought you should know. Word around town is that Ethan Drake at Morrison PR is having serious money troubles. Might want to double-check any outstanding invoices. The beauty of gossip is that it spreads like wildfire, especially when it's juicy and just believable enough to be true. By the next morning, half of Baltimore's professional community would be whispering about Ethan Drake's financial problems. But the real masterstroke came that evening when Pete called to tell me about Ethan's BMW. "Dude, you should have seen it," Pete laughed. The guy comes out to his car, starts it up, and every speaker in the vehicle starts blasting My Heart Will Go On at maximum volume. And I mean maximum. You could hear it 3 blocks away. Could he turn it off? That's the beautiful part. I wired it so the volume control doesn't work when the engine's running. He had to drive all the way home with Celine Dion serenading the entire neighborhood. I grinned. Any witnesses? Half the marina. Plus someone filmed it and posted it online. It's already got like 5,000 views. Perfect. Ethan's professional image was taking hits from multiple directions. Financial rumors, public humiliation, and a cheating scandal that was about to explode into the open. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. "We need to talk. Tonight." I typed back, "Your place or mine?" "Yours. I'm coming over." I looked around my sparse apartment and smiled. Laura was used to controlling the environment of her conversations, meeting on her terms in spaces that gave her psychological advantages. Making her come to my territory was already a small victory. She arrived an hour later, looking perfectly composed despite the stress lines around her eyes. She'd dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, the kind of outfit that said, "reasonable person trying to work things out." "Nice place," she said, glancing around the apartment with barely concealed disdain. "It serves its purpose." She sat on the couch, crossing her legs and arranging herself in a pose that was probably meant to be alluring. "Nick, this has gotten out of hand." "Has it?" "The thing with Tasha was petty, and now you're spreading rumors about Ethan." "What rumors would those be?" "Don't play dumb. Someone's been telling people he's having money problems?" I sat across from her in the apartment's single armchair, maintaining eye contact. "Are you saying he's not having money problems?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "That's not the point." "Actually, Laura, that's exactly the point. See, I've been thinking about this whole open relationship thing you proposed, and I realized you're absolutely right. What? We should be authentic. We should explore. We should stop pretending our marriage is something it's not." She looked confused, like she'd prepared for a fight and found herself in a completely different conversation. "So, you're okay with this?" "I'm okay with honesty. Are you?" "Of course." "Good. Then let's be honest." I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. "Tell me about Ethan." The color drained from her face. "Nick?" "Come on, Laura. You said we should be authentic. How long have you been sleeping with your boss?" "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" "Because I've been doing some math, and the timeline is pretty interesting. Your sudden interest in working late started about 4 months ago, right around the time Ethan's wife noticed some changes in his behavior." Laura stood up abruptly. "You talked to Janet?" "We had coffee. Nice woman. Really interesting perspective on marriage and honesty." "You son of a—" She caught herself, probably realizing that losing her temper would only make things worse. "Finish that sentence," I said calmly. "Let's get it all out in the open." Instead, she turned and walked toward the door. "This conversation is over." "Laura." She paused with her hand on the doorknob. "You wanted an open marriage. Congratulations. You got one." After she left, I sat in my apartment and listened to the recording I'd just made. Laura's voice, admitting she'd talked to Ethan about me, confirming that she knew about my conversation with Janet, revealing more than she'd intended about the timeline of their affair. It was good material, but it was just the opening move. Outside my window, the city lights reflected off the harbor, and I thought about bridges. The ones I built for a living were designed to handle stress, to distribute weight evenly, to remain stable even when the forces acting on them shifted dramatically. My marriage had been a different kind of structure entirely, built on assumptions rather than solid foundations, compromised by hidden flaws destined to collapse under pressure. But I was good at building things, and I was even better at taking them apart. The next morning brought news that Ethan Drake's BMW incident had gone viral. Pete forwarded me the video, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit frantically trying to turn down music that wouldn't cooperate, while marina workers and boat owners watched in amusement. The comments were brutal. When your midlife crisis has a soundtrack, somebody's wife is going to love this. Plot twist, he actually loves Celine Dion. But the real damage was happening behind the scenes. Janet had been busy sharing information about Ethan's finances with carefully selected contacts in Baltimore's tight-knit professional community. Rumors were spreading through the network of lawyers, accountants, and business owners who formed the city's upper-middle-class social structure. I was reviewing structural plans for a new office building when my phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time I recognized the voice immediately. "You think you're clever," Ethan said without preamble. "I think I'm thorough. There's a difference. This ends now. Whatever game you're playing, it stops today." I saved my work and leaned back in my chair. Through my office window, I could see construction workers preparing the foundation for a new apartment complex. Solid, methodical work built on careful planning. "I'm not playing a game, Ethan. I'm responding to one. Laura told me about your little recording session. You want to play hardball? Fine. But you have no idea what you're up against. Enlighten me. I've got connections in this city you can't imagine. One phone call and your career is over. Your reputation, your professional licenses, everything." I almost laughed. "You mean like the phone call Laura already made to my boss, claiming I was unstable and potentially dangerous?" Silence on the other end. "See, that's the thing about fighting dirty, Ethan. Once you start, everyone else gets to play by the same rules." "You don't know what you're talking about. I know your wife hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago. I know you've taken $47,000 in cash advances over the past 6 months. And I know Laura has no idea about either of those things." More silence. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to back off. You're going to stop using your connections to mess with my career. And you're going to have a very honest conversation with Laura about your financial situation. And if I don't, then Janet releases the financial records to your business partners, the private investigator's report goes to your country club, and that video of you serenading the marina gets sent to every client on your company's roster." The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "It's not." That afternoon, I met Pete for lunch at a sports bar near the harbor. The place was packed with construction workers and dockhands, the kind of blue-collar crowd that had no patience for pretension or social climbing. "You sure you want to keep pushing this?" Pete asked, working on his second beer. "These people have money, connections, they could make things difficult." "They already are making things difficult. Laura tried to get me fired. Ethan just threatened to destroy my career. I'm not starting this fight, but I'm damn sure going to finish it." Pete nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Access to Morrison PR's building. After hours." "That's breaking and entering." "That's visiting my wife's workplace to retrieve personal property." "What personal property?" I pulled out a small framed photo from my jacket pocket. It showed Laura and me on our wedding day, both of us smiling like we believed in forever. "She keeps this on her desk. I want it back." Pete studied my face. "There's more to it than that." "There's always more to it than that." Morrison PR occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in the Inner Harbor district, the kind of place that looked impressive to clients but was actually pretty standard inside. Open floor plans, expensive furniture that wasn't quite as expensive as it looked, and security systems designed more for show than actual protection. Pete and I entered through the parking garage at 9 p.m., when the building was mostly empty except for a few workaholics and cleaning crews. Pete's HVAC company had done work in the building 6 months earlier, and he still had access codes for the service areas. "Cameras?" I asked as we took the service elevator to the 15th floor. "Disabled, temporarily. They'll come back online in about 30 minutes. Laura's desk sat in a corner of the open office space, positioned to give her a view of the harbor while still allowing her to monitor her subordinates' activities. The framed photo was exactly where I expected it to be, facing outward so visitors could see what a happy couple we made. But I wasn't really there for the photo. Laura's computer was password protected, but she'd always been careless about security. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, her mother's maiden name, nothing. Then I remembered her vanity and tried Laura Garvey 2023. The desktop opened immediately. "Jesus, Nick," Pete whispered. "You're actually hacking her computer?" "I'm retrieving my personal information from my wife's work files." Laura's email was a goldmine of professional gossip, client complaints, and personal drama. But what I was looking for was more specific. Communication with Ethan, financial records, anything that would give me leverage in the psychological war we were fighting. I found it in a folder marked Personal that contained dozens of emails between Laura and Ethan dating back 5 months. The early messages were professionally flirtatious, the kind of banter that could be dismissed as harmless office dynamics. But they escalated quickly. From Laura, 3 months ago. "Nick's working late again. Seems like we're both married to our jobs these days." From Ethan, same day. "Some jobs are more rewarding than others. Dinner tomorrow?" From Laura, 2 months ago. "I keep thinking about what you said, about taking control of your own happiness." From Ethan. "Life's too short for settling. You deserve better." But the most damaging exchange was from just last week. Laura. "I told him about us. Sort of, suggested an open marriage." Ethan. "How did he take it?" Laura. "Like a child. Stormed out playing the victim, but this actually works better. Now when people ask why we're getting divorced, I can say he couldn't handle a mature conversation about our relationship." Ethan. "Divorced?" Laura. "Eventually. I'm not going to stay married to someone who can't evolve. But there's no rush. Let him embarrass himself for a while first." I copied the entire folder to a flash drive, along with Laura's contact list and calendar. Then I restored the photo to exactly where it had been and cleared the computer's browser history. "Got what you needed?" Pete asked as we headed back to the service elevator. "More than I needed." The next morning, I began the most delicate phase of my campaign, strategic information distribution. The key was making sure the right people learned the right things at the right time, without the information being traced back to me. First, I sent anonymous copies of Ethan's financial records to 3 of his business partners, with a note suggesting they might want to review any deals he'd been negotiating recently. The implication was clear. A man with serious money problems might not be making decisions in his partner's best interests. Second, I forwarded selected email exchanges between Laura and Ethan to Tasha, using a fake account that made it look like the messages had been leaked by a disgruntled Morrison PR employee. Tasha's jealousy and gossip addiction would take care of the rest. Third, I created a detailed timeline of Laura's affair and sent it to her sister Mel, along with a note. "Thought you should know what Laura's been telling people about her marriage." Then I sat back and waited for the dominoes to fall. The first one toppled that afternoon. Tasha called me, her voice shaking with anger. "Did you know?" she demanded. "Know what?" "About Laura and Ethan. How long it's been going on." I suspected something. Why? Someone sent me emails, between them, going back months. "Nick, they've been laughing at all of us. At you, at me, at Janet Drake. Like we're all just entertainment for them." "What kind of emails?" "The kind where your wife calls you a child and talks about how she's going to divorce you once you've embarrassed yourself enough. The kind where her boss talks about you like you're some kind of pathetic obstacle." I let the silence stretch out, giving Tasha time to work herself into a proper fury. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said finally. "Are you? Because honestly, Nick, I'm starting to wonder if you planned this whole thing. The dinner, the photos, getting me involved in their drama. Would that bother you?" Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "Actually, no, it wouldn't. Laura's had this coming for a long time." "What do you mean?" "She thinks she's smarter than everyone else. Always has. In college, she'd steal other girls' boyfriends just to prove she could, then dump them once the challenge was gone. I always wondered when someone would turn the tables on her. So what are you going to do with those emails?" "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should follow your instincts." That evening, Tasha posted a carefully edited selection of Laura and Ethan's email exchanges on her social media accounts, along with a caption about fake friends and their fake open marriages. She tagged half of Baltimore's young professional crowd, ensuring maximum visibility. The response was immediate and brutal. Laura's carefully crafted image as a sophisticated, evolved woman crumbled under the weight of her own words. The emails revealed her as manipulative, calculating, and contemptuous of the people who trusted her. But the real explosion came when Mel called Laura directly. I wasn't there for that conversation, but I heard about it secondhand through Pete, whose girlfriend worked with Mel at a downtown law firm. According to the Gossip Network, it was a 30-minute screaming match that ended with Mel telling Laura she was a selfish, lying piece of work who deserved everything that was coming to her. My phone rang at 10 p.m. Laura, of course. "You did this," she said without preamble. Did what? Don't play innocent. The emails, the financial records, turning my friends against me, this has your fingerprints all over it. I was sitting on my apartment's fire escape, looking out over the harbor lights and enjoying the cool evening air. Laura, I've been sitting in my apartment all day, working on bridge designs and eating takeout Chinese food. If your friends are turning against you, maybe you should ask yourself why. Because someone is feeding them information, or because they're finally seeing who you really are. This is harassment. This is consequences. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear traffic in the background. She was driving, probably circling the city, while she tried to figure out how to regain control of the situation. What do you want? She asked finally. I want honesty. I want you to stop pretending this is about an open marriage or personal growth or any of the other garbage you've been selling. I want you to admit that you've been cheating on me for months and that you never had any intention of working on our relationship. And then what? And then we get divorced like adults instead of playing these games. What about Ethan? What about him? Are you going to keep destroying his life too? I almost laughed. Laura, I haven't destroyed anyone's life. I've just stopped helping you both maintain your lies. His business partners are asking questions about money. His wife hired a lawyer. You've ruined him. He ruined himself. I just turned on the lights. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. I never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did. You just thought you were smart enough to control how far it went. So what happens now? I looked out at the city lights reflecting off the water, thinking about the bridges I'd helped build, structures designed to connect things that were naturally separated, to bear weight and withstand stress and remain standing even when everything around them changed. Now you figure out how to live with the choices you made. And us? There is no us, Laura. There hasn't been for months. You just forgot to mention it. After she hung up, I sat on the fire escape for another hour, listening to the sounds of the city and planning my next move. Laura was starting to crack, but Ethan was still fighting, and wounded animals were often the most dangerous. I was going to need to be very careful about what came next. The morning brought news that Ethan Drake had been placed on administrative leave from Morrison PR. According to Pete's girlfriend, who heard it from Mel, who got it from someone at the country club, Ethan's business partners had discovered some irregularities in his client accounts. Nothing criminal, necessarily, but the kind of creative bookkeeping that looked suspicious when combined with rumors about personal financial problems and extramarital affairs. I was reviewing blueprints for a pedestrian bridge when Janet Drake called. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? For giving me the courage to stop pretending everything was fine. I filed for divorce yesterday. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. It's amazing how much energy you waste trying to save something that's already broken. I knew exactly what she meant. There's something else, Janet continued. Something I think you should know about Laura. What about her? Ethan's been supporting her financially. Not just dinner and gifts, real money. He's been paying her credit card bills, her car payment, even part of her rent. That stopped me cold. Laura made good money at her PR job, enough to afford her lifestyle without help, unless her lifestyle was more expensive than I'd realized. How much money are we talking about? Thousands per month. I found the bank records when I was gathering information for the divorce. He's been transferring money to her for the past 4 months. Does she know you know? Not yet, but my lawyer thinks it's relevant to the divorce settlement. Ethan's been spending marital assets on his mistress. After Janet hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen without seeing the bridge designs. Laura's sudden interest in an open marriage was starting to make more sense. She hadn't just been exploring her authentic self, she'd been exploring Ethan's bank account. But if Ethan was now facing divorce and unemployment, that financial support was about to dry up, which meant Laura was about to discover that her evolved, authentic lifestyle had a very traditional problem. She couldn't afford it. That afternoon, I decided to visit our old house. Technically, it was still half mine until the divorce was finalized, and I had legitimate reasons to collect more of my belongings. Laura's car wasn't in the driveway, but I used my key anyway. The house felt different, like a stage set after the audience had gone home. Laura had rearranged the furniture and added new decorative touches that screamed expensive but whispered desperate. I was packing books from my home office when I heard voices in the backyard. Laura and someone else, talking in urgent, hushed tones. Through the window, I could see Laura pacing around the small patio while a man I didn't recognize sat at the outdoor table. He was older, well-dressed, with the kind of aggressive confidence that usually came with money or power. I cracked the window and listened. Not what we discussed, the man was saying. The situation has changed, Laura replied. Things are more complicated now. Complicated how? My husband is being vindictive. He's spreading rumors, turning people against me. It's affecting my work. The man laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. Your work? Honey, your work is about to be the least of your problems. What do you mean? I mean you owe me $37,000, and I don't care about your marital drama. I felt my stomach drop. Laura had borrowed money from someone who definitely wasn't a bank. I told you, Ethan was handling the payments, but he's having some temporary difficulties. Ethan Drake is finished in this city. His business partners are cutting him loose. His wife is taking him for everything he's worth, and word is he's facing potential charges for client account irregularities. Laura stopped pacing. Charges? Seems someone tipped off the state licensing board about his creative accounting methods. They're launching a full investigation. I hadn't tipped off any licensing board, but someone clearly had. Probably one of Ethan's business partners trying to distance themselves from potential liability. So you see, the man continued, your sugar daddy isn't going to be much help, which means you need to find another way to pay me back. I need more time. You've had 4 months. Time's up. What if I can't pay? The man stood up, straightening his jacket. Then we discuss alternative arrangements. After he left, Laura sat alone on the patio for a long time, staring at her phone like it might contain answers to questions she didn't want to ask. I finished packing my books and slipped out the front door, my mind racing with this new information. Laura wasn't just dealing with a collapsed affair and damaged reputation. She was in serious financial trouble with someone who didn't sound like the forgiving type. That evening, I called Pete. I need you to find out everything you can about a guy, I said. Well-dressed, 50s, drives a black Mercedes sedan. License plate starts with MD7. What kind of everything? Name, business, reputation, especially reputation. This about Laura? This is about understanding what I'm dealing with. Pete called back 2 hours later. Vincent Torino. Runs a private lending business out of Little Italy. Not technically illegal, but not exactly regulated banking either. What kind of interest rates? The kind that compound daily and come with very personal collection policies. Meaning? Meaning your wife borrowed money from someone who doesn't accept the check is in the mail as a valid payment plan? I sat in my apartment, looking out at the harbor lights and thinking about the conversation I'd overheard. Laura had gotten herself into a situation that was spiraling beyond her control, and she was running out of options. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part remembered the phone call to my boss, the lies she'd told our friends, the casual cruelty of her emails with Ethan. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We should meet. Tonight. L. I typed back, where? Our place. I'll explain everything. I stared at the message for a long moment, then grabbed my keys. Laura was waiting in the living room when I arrived, looking smaller than I'd seen her since this whole mess started. She'd been crying, though she'd tried to hide it with makeup. Thank you for coming, she said. What did you want to explain? She gestured for me to sit down, but I remained standing. Control of the physical space, another lesson she'd taught me. I made mistakes, she began. Big ones, and now I'm in trouble. What kind of trouble? Financial trouble. I borrowed some money to maintain appearances during the separation. I thought Ethan would help me pay it back, but now Ethan's broke and unemployed. She looked surprised. You knew? I know a lot of things, Laura, including the fact that you've been taking money from him for months. Her composure cracked a little more. It wasn't like that. What was it like? He wanted to help. He said I deserved better than struggling while we figured things out. And you deserved better than being honest with your husband. She flinched. I know how this looks. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been planning to leave me for months, using another man's money to fund your exit strategy, and lying to everyone about your motivations. I never planned to leave you. The emails say otherwise. Her face went pale. You read my emails? I read the emails Tasha posted online, the ones where you called me a child and talked about divorcing me once I'd embarrassed myself enough. Laura sank into the couch, her carefully maintained facade finally crumbling completely. I was angry when I wrote those, frustrated. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant every word. The only thing you didn't mean was getting caught. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 4 years of marriage settling between us like dust on abandoned furniture. What do you want from me? I asked finally. I want you to help me. Help you what? Pay back the money. Vincent Torino isn't the kind of person you want to owe money to. I almost laughed. You want me to bail you out of debt you incurred while cheating on me. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Nick, please, I'm scared. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. But then I remembered the recording of her laughing about my reaction to her affair announcement, and the sympathy faded. You should be scared, I said. You made choices that have consequences. Adult choices. So you won't help me? I won't enable you. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, then paused. Laura? Yes? Next time you want to evolve, try doing it honestly. Outside, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the house where I'd lived for 3 years. Laura was visible through the living room window, hunched over her phone, probably calling everyone she could think of who might be willing to lend her money. My phone rang. Pete. Where are you? He asked. Sitting outside my old house, watching my wife's life fall apart. How do you feel about that? I thought about the question seriously. How did I feel? Tired, I said finally, and ready for this to be over. It's not over yet, is it? No, but it's close. As I drove back to my apartment, I realized that Laura's financial crisis had changed the entire dynamic of our conflict. She was no longer fighting to maintain her image or justify her choices. She was fighting for survival, which meant she was about to become much more dangerous. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Jim Crawford, my boss, sounded tired and frustrated. Nick, I need you to come in early today. We have a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that involves lawyers and HR representatives and very serious accusations. My stomach clenched. What accusations? Just get here. And Nick, you might want to call a lawyer yourself. I arrived at the office to find Jim waiting with 2 people I didn't recognize. A woman in an expensive suit who looked like she ate corporate executives for breakfast, and a man with the kind of mustache that suggested he took himself very seriously. Nick Garvey? The woman asked. I'm Sandra Chen, representing Morrison PR. This is Detective Williams from Baltimore PD. My mouth went dry. What can I do for you? We'd like to ask you some questions about your recent activities, Detective Williams said. Specifically, your interactions with Ethan Drake and Laura Garvey. Jim looked uncomfortable. Nick, they've made some serious allegations. What kind of allegations? Sandra Chen opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. Security camera images showing Pete and me in the Morrison PR building. Breaking and entering, she said. Computer hacking, harassment, stalking. Also vandalism, Detective Williams added. Mr. Drake's vehicle was tampered with, causing public disturbance and potential safety hazards. I looked at the photos, my mind racing. The security cameras Pete had supposedly disabled had apparently been recording after all. I want to call a lawyer, I said. That's your right, Detective Williams replied, but we'd prefer to handle this informally if possible. Sandra Chen leaned forward. Mr. Garvey, my client is prepared to be reasonable. No charges need to be filed if you're willing to agree to certain conditions. What conditions? A restraining order preventing you from contacting Mr. Drake or Ms. Garvey. Agreement to cease all harassment activities. And financial compensation for damages. I almost laughed. Laura had found a way to turn the tables, using the legal system to silence me and extract money at the same time. How much financial compensation? $40,000. Exactly enough to pay off Vincent Torino, plus a little extra for Laura's troubles. And if I don't agree? Then we file charges and let the court sort it out, Detective Williams said. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, professional licensing board complaints. Could get expensive. Jim shifted uncomfortably. Nick, maybe you should consider... I want to speak to my lawyer, I said firmly. 2 hours later, I sat in the office of Margaret Walsh, a criminal defense attorney Pete's girlfriend had recommended. She was reviewing the photographs and documents Sandra Chen had provided. They have a case, she said finally. Not a strong case, but enough to cause you serious problems. The building entry could be prosecuted as breaking and entering, even if you had legitimate reasons to be there. What about the harassment claims? Harder to prove, but the pattern of behavior they're describing could support a stalking charge, especially combined with the computer access. So I should take the deal? Margaret leaned back in her chair. That depends. How much is your reputation worth? Your career? Your freedom? I thought about Laura sitting in our old house, scared and desperate, calling in favors and making threats to save herself from the consequences of her own choices. What if I told you I had evidence that Laura and Ethan have been engaged in financial fraud? What kind of evidence? I pulled out my phone and played the recording of Vincent Torino's conversation with Laura. Margaret listened with growing interest. "This changes things," she said when it finished. "If Laura borrowed money under false pretenses, using her relationship with Ethan as collateral she couldn't actually provide, that's fraud. And if Ethan was using company funds to support her, that's embezzlement." "Exactly. But Nick, you obtained this recording by trespassing on private property." "I obtained it from my own backyard. Technically," she smiled, "technically might be enough." That afternoon, I called Sandra Chen. "I've reviewed your offer," I told her. "I have a counter-proposal." "I'm listening." "Your clients drop all charges and leave me alone. In exchange, I don't turn over evidence of their financial crimes to the appropriate authorities." "Silence on the other end?" "What evidence?" "The kind that would interest the FBI's white-collar crime division and Vincent Torino's collection department." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Ask Laura. She'll explain it." I hung up and waited. The call came back 20 minutes later. Laura, not Sandra Chen. "You recorded Vincent?" Her voice was shaking. "I recorded a conversation in my own backyard between two people discussing criminal activity." "Nick, you don't understand. If Vincent finds out I've been talking about our arrangement, then you better hope your lawyer friends can make this go away quickly." "What do you want?" "I want you to withdraw all charges, fire your lawyer, and disappear from my life. Permanently. And if I do that, you'll keep quiet about Vincent?" "I'll keep quiet about everything. The money, the fraud, the embezzlement, all of it." Another long pause. "How do I know you won't use it against me later?" "Because unlike you, Laura, when I give my word, I keep it." That evening, Pete and I sat at our usual bar, watching the Orioles lose to the Yankees on the big screen TV. "So it's over?" Pete asked. "The legal part is over. Laura dropped the charges, Ethan's too busy trying to avoid prison to cause me trouble, and I'm officially a free man." "What about the divorce?" "Laura's lawyer called this afternoon. She's agreeing to an uncontested divorce with equitable distribution of assets. No alimony, no drama, just a clean break." Pete raised his beer. "To clean breaks." "To clean breaks." We drank in comfortable silence for a while, watching overpaid athletes play a children's game badly. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said eventually. "What?" "Laura was right about one thing. We did need to be more honest with each other. We did need to stop pretending our marriage was something it wasn't." "Think she learned anything from this?" I thought about Laura, probably sitting in our old house right now, figuring out how to pay off Vincent Torino and rebuild her shattered reputation. I think she learned that actions have consequences. Whether that changes her behavior is up to her. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for keeping your word. I'm sorry for everything. L." I showed it to Pete, who shook his head. "You going to respond?" I deleted the message without replying. Some conversations are better left finished. Outside the bar, Baltimore's harbor sparkled with reflected lights. From the office buildings and restaurants that lined the waterfront. Somewhere out there, people were falling in love, getting married, making promises they believed they'd keep forever. And somewhere else, other people were discovering that forever was a lot shorter than they'd expected. I walked back to my truck, thinking about the bridges I'd helped build over the years. Structures designed to connect separated places, to bear weight and withstand stress and remain standing even when everything around them changed. Some bridges lasted decades, others collapsed under the first real test. The trick was knowing which kind you were building before you started construction. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing final inspection reports for the pedestrian bridge project when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Nick, this is Janet Drake." "Janet, how are you holding up?" "Better than expected, actually. The divorce is moving forward smoothly, and I wanted to thank you again for everything." "You don't need to thank me." "Actually, I do. And there's something else. Something I think you should know about Laura." I set down my pen. "What about her?" "She's been calling Ethan, trying to get him to take her back." "Take her back?" "Apparently, Vincent Torino wasn't satisfied with just getting his money. He's been spreading word around the city about Laura's situation. Her reputation is completely shot, and no PR firm in Baltimore will hire her." I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. Might have been. What did Ethan tell her? That she was delusional if she thought he'd risk what little credibility he had left on someone who'd already destroyed his marriage and career. "How do you know all this?" Janet laughed, a sound with more humor than bitterness. "Because he called me afterward, crying about how sorry he was and begging me to consider reconciliation." "And?" "And I told him that ship had sailed, been torpedoed, and was currently resting on the ocean floor next to the Titanic." After Janet hung up, I sat staring out my office window at the construction site across the street. Workers were laying the foundation for a new apartment building, methodical and careful, building something designed to last. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Drinks tonight? Got news?" "Good news or bad news?" I typed back. "Interesting news." We met at our usual spot, a dive bar near the harbor that served cold beer and minded its own business. Pete was already on his second drink when I arrived. "So what's the interesting news?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from him. "Laura's moving." "Moving where?" "Out of state. Word is she's got a job offer in Atlanta, some small PR firm that doesn't do background checks too carefully." I absorbed this information while signaling the bartender for a beer. "When?" "End of the month. She's been quietly selling everything she can't pack in her car." "What about the house?" "Bank's foreclosing. Turns out she was behind on the mortgage payments even before this whole mess started." The bartender brought my beer, and I took a long sip, thinking about Laura packing up the life she'd built in Baltimore, running away from the consequences of her choices. "You okay with this?" Pete asked. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because it means she's getting away, starting over somewhere else while you're stuck here dealing with the aftermath." I considered that. Was I stuck? My job was secure, my reputation intact, my future wide open. Laura was the one running away. "I'm not stuck," I said finally. "I'm exactly where I want to be." "Which is?" "Free." We drank in comfortable silence, watching the evening crowd filter in. Office workers unwinding after long days, couples on dates, groups of friends celebrating or commiserating or just passing time, normal people living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. "There's something else," Pete said eventually. "What?" "Ethan Drake was arrested yesterday." I set down my beer. "For what?" "Embezzlement. Turns out the state licensing board investigation turned up some creative accounting that went way beyond just supporting his girlfriend. He's been skimming client accounts for over a year." "How much?" $250,000, give or take." I whistled softly. "That's serious prison time." 5 to 10 years, according to the news report. His lawyer's trying to work out a plea deal, but it doesn't look good. So Ethan's financial problems had been worse than anyone realized, and his affair with Laura had been just one symptom of a much larger pattern of poor judgment and criminal behavior. "Feel bad for him?" Pete asked. "I feel bad for his clients, for Janet, for everyone who trusted him and got betrayed. But not for him. No, not for him." My phone rang. Laura's number, which I hadn't seen on my caller ID in weeks. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Hello, Laura?" "Nick?" Her voice sounded small, defeated. "I heard about Ethan." "What about him?" "The arrest, the charges. I wanted you to know I had nothing to do with the embezzlement." "I know." "You do?" "Laura, you're a lot of things, but you're not a criminal. Manipulative, dishonest, selfish, sure. But not criminal." Silence on the other end. "I'm leaving Baltimore," she said finally. I heard. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. For the way I handled things, for the lies, for trying to destroy your reputation to save mine." "Okay. That's it? Just okay?" I looked around the bar, at Pete nursing his beer and pretending not to listen, at the other patrons living their uncomplicated lives. "What do you want me to say, Laura? That I forgive you? That I understand? That we can be friends?" "I don't know. Something. Here's something. I hope you learned from this. I hope you figure out how to be honest with the next person you claim to love, and I hope you never put anyone else through what you put me through." "Nick, goodbye, Laura." I hung up and turned off my phone. "That sounded final," Pete observed. "It was." "How do you feel?" I thought about the question, really considered it. How did I feel? "Tired," I said. "But good tired. Like I've been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally got to put it down." "Any regrets?" "About the marriage?" "Yeah. I regret not seeing who she really was sooner. I regret wasting 4 years on someone who was never really there." "What about the revenge? The whole elaborate campaign to destroy her life?" I finished my beer and considered that question seriously. "I didn't destroy her life, Pete. I just stopped helping her maintain the lies that were destroying mine. Everything that happened to Laura and Ethan was the result of choices they made. But you orchestrated it. You manipulated the situation to make sure those consequences hit them as hard as possible." "Yeah, I did." "Any regrets about that?" I thought about Laura, probably packing boxes in our old house right now, preparing to run away to Atlanta and start over with a new identity and a carefully edited personal history. I thought about Ethan, sitting in a jail cell, finally facing the reality of what his greed and selfishness had cost him. I thought about Janet, free from a marriage that had been slowly poisoning her life. And I thought about myself, sitting in a bar with my best friend, no longer wondering what my wife was really doing when she worked late or who she was really texting when she thought I wasn't looking. No, I said finally. No regrets. Outside, Baltimore's harbor reflected the lights of the city, and somewhere in the distance a ship's horn sounded as another vessel made its way out to sea. People were always coming and going, starting journeys and ending them, building things and tearing them down. But the bridges remained, connecting what needed to be connected, bearing the weight of all that traffic, standing strong against whatever storms came their way. I walked back to my truck, thinking about the new project that had just been approved, a suspension bridge that would span the Patapsco River, connecting communities that had been separated for generations. It would take 3 years to build, require careful planning and precise engineering, and when it was finished, it would last for decades. Some things were worth building to last, and some things, I'd learned, were worth tearing down. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment and made coffee and read the newspaper like a normal person with a normal life. The sports section reported that the Orioles had actually won a game, which seemed like a good omen. My phone showed 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, but I didn't bother checking the voicemails. Whatever drama was still swirling around Laura's departure from Baltimore, I was no longer part of it. I drove to work through familiar streets, past the harbor where I'd walked with Tasha that night when this whole mess began, past the office building where Laura had worked and plotted and ultimately destroyed her own carefully constructed life. At my desk, I opened the files for the new bridge project and began the long, methodical process of turning an idea into reality. Foundation specifications, load calculations, materials analysis. The kind of work that required patience and precision and absolute honesty about the forces involved. My phone rang. Jim Crawford. "Nick, got a minute? There's someone here who wants to meet you." I walked to Jim's office and found him talking with a woman I didn't recognize. 30s, professional but not flashy. The kind of person who looked competent rather than decorative. "Nick Garvey," Jim said. "Meet Sarah Collins. She's the new project manager for the Patapsco River Bridge." Sarah stood and shook my hand with a firm grip. "I've been looking forward to working with you. Your reputation for structural integrity is impressive." "Structural integrity," I repeated, liking the sound of it. "The ability to withstand stress without losing essential characteristics," she said with a slight smile. "Pretty important quality in bridge building." "And in bridge builders," I replied. As we discussed the project timeline and engineering challenges, I found myself thinking that maybe Pete had been wrong about one thing. Maybe I wasn't stuck in Baltimore, dealing with the aftermath of Laura's betrayal. Maybe I was exactly where I belonged, building things designed to last, working with people who valued honesty and competence over image and manipulation. Maybe this wasn't the aftermath at all. Maybe this was the beginning. That evening, I sat on my fire escape, looking out over the harbor lights and thinking about the conversation I'd had with Laura the night before. Her apology, her attempt to find some kind of closure or forgiveness or understanding. The truth was, I didn't hate her anymore. Hatred required too much energy, and I had better things to do with mine. But I didn't forgive her either. Forgiveness implied that what she'd done was forgivable, and I wasn't sure it was. What I felt was something simpler and more final. Indifference. Laura was no longer my problem to solve, my responsibility to manage, my burden to carry. She was just someone I used to know. Someone who taught me valuable lessons about trust and betrayal and the difference between who people pretended to be and who they really were. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Orioles won again. End time's approaching." I laughed and typed back, "Or maybe things are finally looking up." Below me, the city hummed with its usual evening energy. People heading home from work, meeting friends for dinner, starting new relationships or ending old ones, all of them building bridges or burning them, making choices that would ripple out through their lives in ways they couldn't predict or control. But that was the thing about bridges. Once you knew how to build them properly, you could always build another one. And sometimes, tearing down the ones that were poorly constructed was the only way to make room for something better. I finished my beer and went inside, ready to start planning tomorrow's work on a project that would outlast all of us. Somewhere across the city, Laura was probably packing the last of her belongings, preparing for her escape to Atlanta and whatever new lies she'd tell about her past. And somewhere else, Ethan was learning that actions have consequences, even for people who'd spent their lives believing the rules didn't apply to them. But here, in my small apartment overlooking the harbor, I was free to build whatever came next. And that, I thought, was the last laugh after all.